Hello, it's me, Marilia. I want to welcome you to Salto del Gato. This is my YouTube channel and this is my Gumshoe playlist. For those of you who are returning subscribers, welcome back. And to those of you that are new subscribers, welcome, and I hope you enjoy this presentation. We're going to jump right into it. This is the continuation of Rudy Farias. And oh my God, this is going to be one of those layers on top of layers. And all I've got to say is Janie, Janie, Janie. The next day, the police holds a press conference. In that press conference, the police, first of all, was the weirdest press conference I've ever seen. So we go from bad to worse here. The police chief and a team of investigators come out, and the first thing they address is something that has nothing to do with Rudy Farias. They're talking about, I guess, community complaints that a percentage of police vehicles do not have dash cams on them. And then the police chief goes off into a tangent about how poor they are, that they don't have the funds to do this, that they have vehicles that are so old and outdated that they can't even replace those vehicles, that the mileage on their vehicles are over 100,000 miles. The vehicles, in other words, can't even be resold or repaired because they're so old. The unmarked cars, he says the unmarked cars are even older than the vehicles with lights and things. He goes on and on and on. At one point he says, yes, people criticize us because we have a $2 billion budget, but that $2 billion covers salaries. 90% of it goes towards salaries and pensions. So I was glad to know that police officers are being well compensated and that their families are being taken care of. But he claims that there's just not enough money to go around to be able to equip all of his vehicles with webcams. But he does say, so he says that 60% of his vehicles have webcams, about 40% don't, but he says that 100% of his officers have those body cams. I guess that's what they're called, body cams, that they carry on them when they respond to a crime or a police call. Anyway, he then further goes on to say that, you know, what a great mayor they have. That the mayor has learned of this situation. So I guess whatever this complaint was, it caused an uproar in the community because it got back to the mayor. And I guess the mayor said, hey, look, I'm going to give you another $2 million. Get yourself some dash cams for those vehicles. So it talks about that. And I'm talking about probably a better half of this conference was about that. He even says the community is going to have to decide whether they want officers to be able to respond to crime or what they want to do. I don't know what he meant by that. Anyway, at some point then he starts talking about the Farias case, and he says that yes, Rudy Farias has surfaced, and yes, it is him, and yes, they have documented that it is him, and he's back with his mother by his choice, Rudy and his mother's choice, and that they were okay with that. And he alludes to the fact that Rudy is an adult, and he goes back, he says, I'm going to just tell you something, that at the time that he disappeared, he was 17 years old, and in Houston, a 17-year-old male is considered an adult. They can't vote, they can't probably drink, but for the police department, they're considered, I guess legally they're considered an adult. The males are. So I don't know what he meant by that. Did he mean that, well, the fact that he disappeared and we never found a body or whatever, he was an adult, basically? If he didn't want to be home, he didn't want to be home, so they didn't pursue it. Magical thinking, I don't know. Or is he saying that now, 8 years later, he's 25 years old, if he wants to be with his mother, we can't intervene and tell him he can't go? And he's right. He's absolutely right. If an adult says to an officer, no, I want to go home. What's an officer going to do? They can't do anything. And if he is an abused person, I don't know what the law allows an officer to do other than to talk to the person, because this happens in domestic issues all the time. They show up for domestic response, the woman's all beat up, and they ask her, do you want to press charges? And she says no. They have to leave. They can't force her, no, we're going to put you in jail. That seems to not happen anymore. However, I know that now, after the Gabby Petito crime, some states have implemented laws that when there is a domestic violence call, one of the parties is taken to jail, at least overnight. I guess it's like a cooling off period, whatever. But in this case, it's a mother and son. They obviously asked, do you want to go home with your mother? And he said yes. And so they let him go. This irates Quinnell because he goes off on a tangent about why they didn't do anything. But at the police conference, the police is saying, we don't have any crime or any way of charging them with any crime. All we have are very minor crimes that would be the equivalent of issuing them a traffic violation. And that's not sufficient to arrest them. And so what they did, the police chief says that he reached out to the prosecutor's office for guidance. And the prosecutors told him, no, release them because you don't, until you complete your investigation, you don't have any proof of anything having happened. I mean, there's allegedly this, allegedly that. Yes, he was supposedly gone for 8 years and now has reappeared, and it sure as hell looks like he was never gone and that she was hiding him. But you can't take that at face value by somebody saying, oh, no, he was never gone, even if it's the neighbors. That has to go through the process of a full evaluation, a full investigation. And then all that information has to be brought back into a police department to process this and determine what crimes exactly to charge one or the other or both with. And it was too early yet to do this. But this police officer needed a press secretary because, in my opinion, he handled this all wrong, and it just upset the hell out of everybody else out there. Because I know that all of us sleuthers, because I was watching some online sleuthers who were streaming this live, and all of the comments were the same, like, what? So you can't now help but wonder if he just came out and spoke for over half of this conference about how poor his police department is. Are we supposed to believe that he's going to take time and resources and apply them to processing all these allegations about this woman to see what has been wrong, basically for beating and abusing her son, who is an adult, who, if he agreed to be a slave and a victim and be beat, who can do anything? I think that the public, because of the emotions involved and the shock of what might be alleged here, I think that that's getting in the way of being able to understand the police's position. And the police chief didn't do anything to, kind of win people over to his side and help them understand what his parameters are. And maybe he feels like he doesn't have to. Look, I'm a police. I can't do anything, and that's just the way it is. So he did say that the investigation is ongoing and that they're not going to talk any further about anything in order to protect the integrity of whatever investigation they're going to do. Now, the detective that allegedly was in the room with Quinnell when he spoke with Rudy, he came out and he said that Rudy did not describe to him or reveal to him that any SA had taken place. And here again, I go to words. Words matter. So if Rudy said, she made me play daddy, we can interpret that in any way we want. We can assigned to that it means this, that it means that she forced him to be intimate with it. We can do all that. But that's not what Rudy said to the police officer. All the police officer heard is, she made me play daddy. And legally, there's probably no rule that says that you can't make your son play daddy unless you kind of elaborate. And then the question comes up that, what if he agreed to play daddy? Even if that happened, if he agreed to it, what can the police do? And if he didn't agree to it, is he willing to, charge his mother with the RAPE word? If he doesn't, what can the police do? And according to what was being said in the community, Texas does have an incest law, but how enforceable are those things? And how do you prove that? I don't know, unless one party is willing to come out and be the one to accuse the other. I don't know. You're taking, it's a he said, she said, and that he said, she said is between the police department and Quinnell, because Rudy ain't talking to anybody. All right, so the conference ends. This is July 6th, the police conference. Remember that the first media conference that Quinnell held was the day before, which was July 5th at the hotel. This July 6th conference is taking place at the police department's offices. The next day, on July 7th, Quinnell announces emphatically, almost sounding angrily, on a Facebook Live platform, which is Grizzy's. Remember, that's her platform. Anytime that you hear a long silence, if you are listening to this as a podcast, it's because I have inserted images into the video with no dialogue. She has a huge following there. And they announced that there's going to be a live media conference held in front of Janie Santana's house. And he is emphatic. And so he shows up there, and he has a group of people with him. I'll call him his posse. And they're all dressed up in black, and they have like logos, badges on them. And they are the new Black Panther Nation group. And so let me stop here, because I remember the Black Panthers from back in the 60s and 70s. So I don't know if this is the same group that has reorganized themselves, but there's a lady there, and she has a cowboy hat, and she's got a lot of jewelry and great nails. And she has a bunch of papers in her hand. There's Quinnell, and then there's a bunch of people. Some of them are masked, hiding their faces. And what you don't see is that there's a huge media gathering, and there are members of the family. I should stop here a minute. Let's go up back to yesterday's police conference. After that conference ends, the sisters of Janie, which is Pauline, her daughter, who I believe her name is Michelle, two other sisters that I didn't get their names, come out and talk to the media, and they just blurt out all of the family dirty laundry going back generationally. Pauline appears to be the spokesperson for this, and her daughter. Her daughter goes on in a very calm voice and explains why they are sure that everything Quinnell has said is true. They're really actually at this point aligning themselves with Quinnell. And they tell stories about how in the past ensuing years, Janie, these sisters are Janie's sisters, and they share a mother, but they have different fathers. Pauline claims that Janie's father essayed her when she was a child. And you can hear the anger and bitterness in her voice. And she claims that Janie has a history of being a manipulator, a liar, a thief. She has been married a bunch of different times, and that she's always doing scams for money. And she then says she's just like her father, who SA'd me when I was a child. And that's how she is. She's like them. And then she tries to go on and say, and his brother also tried to SA. And at some point, Cornell, and this is at the second conference, Cornell tries to pull her back and keep her from saying anything further. So we get a glimpse that this family has total dysfunction generationally, and that these types of allegations of SA are also generational. And that these girls that are now older women are all severely impacted by their traumatic experiences in this family. But we don't know the whole story here, so I don't know. But it seems that they are absolutely believing everything that is being alleged by Cornell that Rudy would have. This lady, Pauline, worked for a senior care company. And at some point, their mother had become a ward of the state, which means, I'm not sure what that means, but I know, like in the state of Florida, Medicare, and each state is a little different, because although Medicare is a federal and state funded agency, the states have their way of being able to apply different rules. In the state of Florida, for instance, if you are a senior, you can choose to have a family member care for you in your home, and Medicare pays that family member. Now, this woman, Pauline, is with a senior care company, but her mother was in the care of Janine. And Pauline claims that when she would go to the house, she would follow the model of the senior care company she worked with, and she would come unannounced, and that she would always find her mother. First of all, it would take Janie about 20 minutes to respond, and that she would show up unannounced, because this would take place after several attempts at trying to reach her mother by phone, or even Janie, and nobody would answer her. So she'd show up at the house unannounced. She'd knock on the door, and after 20 minutes, Janie would answer the door finally. And when she walked in there, she said the house was always in deplorable conditions. She said that the house reeked of urine, and that the mother was found pretty much in really horrific conditions. She had bed sores, her mattress smelled of urine, and she wasn't clean. So I don't know if that meant that she was in her soiled diapers. I'm not sure. But she stayed in Janine's care, so that's something. I call her Janine. She was left in Janie's care, and I don't know what the rules are again here. So I don't know if a sister can then say, listen, she shouldn't be kept here. I don't know. I don't know what the legal reasons are for being able to intervene. Or if she intervened, what could she do? They didn't have funds to put the mother in elder care, and evidently she worked and couldn't take care of her. So I don't know what the dynamics were there. But the mother stayed in Janie's care, I guess. I don't know. Maybe something will come up about that. And she passed away. And she was into her 80s and eventually developed dementia. But this sister, Pauline, and some of her nieces who would go visit the mother and grandmother in Janie's house said that they were always told by the grandmother that Rudy is here. He comes to visit me all the time. He's here. Where? He's right there. And that when Pauline, would go into the room, that Janie would come out and say, where are you going? And she would say, I just want to go in here and check the room because I want to make sure the house is clean. But they wouldn't find Rudy. Now she thinks that in that 20 minutes while she was at the door, that Janie probably let him out so he can go and across the yard and go into the woods. Maybe those were the times that he would go visit neighbors. I don't know. But they also were a time that if he wanted to escape, he had an opportunity to, and he didn't. So there is that. So the family dynamics here are really strange and multi-layered. And so digging through this would probably take years, because there's so many layers of personalities and psychologies and manipulation involved that who knows what's going on here. At the end of Quinnell's conference, at the end of the police conference, one of the things that the police said, so we're going to go back to the day before, at the end of their conference or during their conference, one of the things they said is that he is now staying with family members. That's when the sisters come out after the police conference ended and tells the media that's a lie. He's not with family members. He is actually at the home of a friend of Janie, one of her co-workers. And indeed, the media does locate this place, and they go over there, and it's a weird house. It looks like it's got this wall built around it, and the gate is made of, the tin roofs that were corrugated. So there was like pieces of tin roof sections placed on the gate, almost like, I guess if somebody had a drive-by, I don't know if the bullets would go through it. I'm just saying, it looked scary. And a woman comes out, and she's very angry and aggressive and loud, and she's telling the media, go away. No one is coming in here. Don't even try to come in here. She gets very aggressive. At some point, that is diffused by someone, I don't know who, and Pauline claims that her and her son were able to enter that compound and talk to Rudy, and that he was fine, and that he was at where he wanted to be. So there you have it. He's an adult. He can choose. I want to be here. And that he does not want to have anything to do with his mother, which, by the way, he had told Quinnell that he didn't want his mother to go to prison. And he had, I guess, voiced that or something similar to the police. So here we have an adult who's obviously refusing to press any charges against his mother. And he's also not choosing to go to the home of family members. Is that his own, from his own volition, or is that under the influence of his mother's control? We don't know, but we're dealing with an adult. So we can't pull him out of there and tell him, we're going to take you to safety. You can't do that to an adult. So that's where all of that ended. But at that second conference, at the front of Janie's house, Quinnell lost it. His manure was all over the place. He was aggressive, angry, and threatening about the police, claiming that he had recorded all that was said, and that if they kept lying about what actually happened, that he was going to release it to the media. The poop got deep here. They were flinging threats at the police. And then that lady that had the hat, that had the badge, that she was a Black Panther member, she wrote a bunch of notes about the law, and she gets out there, and I guess what they're trying to say, they're not charging them with anything. Well, here's all these violations, and she goes through all these charges of crimes that they could have been charged with. But what they don't talk about are the words that were used. The words that were used, and slightly different today was that the words that Quinnell was using, where he had said in the past that he told me that he was made to sleep in the same bed with her, and she was in her birthday suit, and she forced her French kissing on him. Today, he's just saying, she made me play daddy. Today, Quinnell is saying that Rudy told him, she made me play daddy. She told me I had to be the husband. So he was backing off a little bit and kind of using the same words. So when they're reading this list of charges, my questions are, okay, but where is the proof? You have to have proof before you charge someone. You can't just look at something and speculate and says, this sounds like they did this, so I'm going to go arrest them for that. Because you have to then take the time to bring them to court, prosecute them before a jury, according to whatever the parameters of the law are, if you do come up with any of those charges. And that's a huge expense. No one is not thinking about that. And we do live in some crazy ass inflated times. So I don't know what's going to happen here. But Quinnell was angry. And at one point he says that before he got there, that he got a call. He claims from somebody in the media that said that she, Janine, had made, I don't know if she made a call or a post or somehow or another said that she's in the house and she's got guns and nobody better come to her house to hold a press conference because she's going to shoot them. So he had masked men who were standing there facing the house. I didn't see any guns, but I guess he was ready for a showdown. Honey, this is a Texas showdown. So the conference ends, and we haven't heard anything else from the police. But the online media sleuths are just beginning. So let's now dissect a couple of these characters. So let's talk a bit about Janie. This, I don't know if you'll be able to see it. This is a petition that was filed on October 31st of 2013 by Gilbert Juarez. Gilbert was one of several husbands that we know of to date. Let me adjust that light. That we know of to date that Janie married. I don't even know if I could put these in chronological order, but I will try. So let's see. The earliest marriage I think I've been able to document for her was July of 1997. She married a man named Patrick Rocha. I have no idea who he was. But in a petition that she filed, it alleges that she was still the common law wife. I don't know what the common law wife means in Texas. I know that in other states, and I think Florida might be one of them. I'm not even sure if Florida has a common law clause, but some states recognize unions of people who have been together for 10 years or more as common law marriages. So I don't know if this is what this is referring to, or if it means something else. But she was married to him in 1997. And it doesn't show where she ever got a divorce. In 1998, she married John P. Gonzalez. John P. Gonzalez was a police officer. I don't know if he was with Houston, but he was a police officer. And he had been 23 years service in the police force. He died in 2007. She married him in August of 1998. Now, one of the documents is a bit confusing because it shows that I'm not even going to confuse you by saying, but one of them says that she petitioned for an annulment because she was already married to Patrick Rocha. Okay, so she married Patrick Rocha in 1997. He was the first one. Then she married John P. Gonzalez in 1998. Then she marries a Robert Larios in 1999. Then, at some point, she marries Uristi, which is the father of her eldest son, who's now deceased, Charles. That was his name, Charles Uristi. And I don't know what year she married him. But in 2009, while she was still married to Larios, she married a man named Sucre Amauri Diaz. She married him in 2009, and they were still married as of 2013 by a petition that Diaz filed. I don't know if it was against her or what. But in 2013, she marries, by proxy, a Gilbert Juarez. And it is Gilbert who files this petition to declare the marriage void, because he found out she was already married to at least a couple of other men. I don't mean to laugh, but this is hysterical. So, I think that was the last of her marriages. So let me just check. So she was married at some point to somebody named Rodriguez, maybe, or that was just a name that she picked out of the air. So one of the things about Janie, these are a list of some of her aliases. She was known as Janie Santana Rodriguez, Janie Santana Larios, Janie Uristi, Janie Santana Rocha, Janie Santana Gonzalez, Janie Santana Diaz. All of those except, all of those were names of ex-husbands. So, yeah, because Rodriguez was John T. Rodriguez. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Seven husbands that I've been able to track. And then, of course, affairs, because she had an affair with Farias, to whom she was never married. So she has this history of using people, I guess. So she has all these marriages. Several of those marriages overlap. Additionally, she also has a history of having a multitude of aliases besides these. These were just 7, but there's a good over 20 more. Here's a brief list of several of her dozens of aliases. And to go with those, there are online profiles on different platforms. This is merely one of her dozens of online profiles, where she places a picture and a name, and at some times she even has a multitude of these, so about as many as she has aliases. And she'll put a name that she picks out of the air, adds a picture, and develops a character. She should have been a playwright. And then she has another one that she does the same thing to, and then these two profiles friend each other as if they know each other, to lend further credibility that these are real people. And they talk to each other, and then maybe a third. This is an intricate web of crazy in her head. And so my magical thinking, think that she was catfishing people and maybe use some of these profiles to scam people. I know that there was an incident somewhere in Louisiana where a woman had her son who also disappeared. Somehow or another, Janie contacts that woman and alleges that somebody saw her son, Rudy, and this other woman's son, I think his name was Jake, together somewhere. I forget where. And even, starts a whole line of communication with this poor woman. I don't know what her end goal was with this. Whether her end goal was to try to reach out to other nonprofit agencies that assist people in this situation to search for their loved ones, to maybe gain more money from them, or if she was going to scam this woman. I don't know what she was doing. But this is the story that's developing or that's evolving about who Janie Santana is. So it's not far-fetched to believe now that she is capable of doing some of the things that Quanell X alleges Rudy told that had occurred to him. And it's not far-fetched to believe the stories that Janie's own sisters are saying about her, that she is a manipulator, that she is a liar, that she is a scammer, that she is a thief, that she uses people, and that she's a controlling type of personality. So there's dysfunction here. Definitely, I think she embodies a psychopathic, dysfunctional, extremely damaged person. Is there any way that a person like her could ever be helped? Or is this the way her brain has now wired itself and there's no way of untangling that mess? I don't know. All I know is that that's who she is. Now let's talk a little bit about who Quanell is. Quanell is from Texas. I think he's been there all his life. I don't know much about where he was born or any of that, but I know that in 1992, his brother was killed, and I think it involved the police. So I don't know if it was in a shooting with the police or I don't know how, but he was killed, him and about 3 other people. And that's what really brought Quanell into the community activism role that he's now in, because he really became involved in that. Now, that happened in 1992. In 2018, Quanell, who had been associated with the Nation of Islam, with the Black Panther organization, was also a community activist all this time, where he would represent or be a liaison between families of either crimes or families of perpetrators. He would act as a liaison between them and the police. But evidently he didn't do this for free. He did this for funds. And I don't know if the families themselves were paying him or if, again, this was a situation where nonprofit organizations pay him to do this. But he was receiving funds because somewhere along the line, the association that he was involved with in 2018 ousted him. He was removed from having anything to do with them because about 12 families came out and said that he had received funds but never represented them. So he basically defrauded them. And in fact, at some point, a grandmother was represented by an attorney who sued and successfully got a settlement against Quanell, saying that it was a $200,000 settlement that he was ordered to pay back to this grandmother, and he never did. At least as of 2022, he never paid it back. But in total, he is said to have, I'll call it embezzled, but defrauded some of the people that he was allegedly representing in the community of about $348,000. So Quanell is not squeaky clean, and he does have a past history. Now, can people redeem themselves? Absolutely. Am I saying that Quanell is doing anything wrong? No, I am not. I am merely saying that there's questions. I have questions, especially when I see how really passionate he is, not only about inserting himself into this mess, but continuing his engagement with this mess and threatening the police in a very obscure way with possible legal action. As I'm thinking, does he see that this is a potential way that he can make money? He does have that $200,000 judgment against him. So, all these players are a colorful bunch. And the dynamics in this community is crazy. And I'm not sure where any of this is going to go. In case I didn't say this about Rudy. So Rudy is the biological son of Rudy Farias III, who selected out of life at his own hand. And on Rudy III's obituary, there was a list of children mentioned. If I've already said this, I'll edit it out. But he is said, Rudy III was married to a woman named, I think it was Mary, Mary, and they'd been married like 17 years. In the obituary, a list of children are shown there, and it begins with the Rudy Farias IV. So when I first saw that, I thought, oh, well, he acknowledged Rudy, and he's maybe the firstborn son, because normally you list them in chronological order, or the youngest to oldest, I'm not sure. But it turns out that's not the case. What it turns out is that Rudy had two sons named Rudy Farias IV. His son with his wife, and the child he produced with Janie. And I'm sure that Janie, just out of spite, decided, I'm calling my son Rudy Farias IV too. So I wanted to clarify that. So this is where we are. We have one damaged individual after another, after another, after another. And we don't know where this is going to play out. So this is me, Marilia. I want to thank those of you who have stayed this long to listen to this. I hope you found this interesting. As always, I am so encouraging of your comments. Tell me what you think about these characters in this crime, because they're a mess. As always, I'm your host, Marilia, signing off.